The 90s were loud, neon, and absolutely convinced the future would be extreme. Ads were mini-movies, late-night phone lines ruled the airwaves, and every brand yelled like it was the last commercial on Earth. Watching those spots today can feel like stepping into a parallel universe where dial-up, low-fat cookies, and collect calls were the height of innovation. In this episode of Past and Present, we're revisiting 12 retro 90s ads that feel totally strange today. Not because people in the 90s were clueless, but because culture, laws, and technology moved on so fast that these commercials now play like time capsules, with weird settings turned on. Buckle up, grab your Surge soda, okay, maybe just water, and let's time travel. 1. Cigarette ads that flirted with youth culture. If you grew up near a convenience store in the 90s, you might remember cartoonish camels in sunglasses, racing jackets, neon point-of-sale displays, and those weirdly aspirational catalogue mailers that let you trade miles or cash for branded jackets and coolers. Back then, a lot of tobacco advertising had already been kicked off TV in some countries, but print, billboards, and in-store displays were still everywhere. The strange part, looking back, is how deliberately cool the imagery felt. Motorcycles, pool halls, beach scenes, and how close it was to teen aesthetics. Today, with tighter rules on youth marketing and an entirely different public perception of smoking, the idea of a cartoon mascot or a brand loyalty program for cigarettes seems surreal. Even if you didn't smoke, you knew the iconography, which is exactly the point and exactly why it feels so off now. 2. 1 to 900 chat lines after midnight. Imagine you're channel surfing past midnight and the TV is suddenly a soft focus world of whispered invitations, scrolling phone numbers, and promises that your new best friends are waiting on the other end of the line for a few dollars per minute. These commercials were everywhere in the 90s. Some framed as party lines, some as dating, others far more adult. The aesthetics were unmistakable. Blue gels, slow-motion pillows, laughter that sounded like it had an echo effect. What makes these ads strange today isn't just their vibe, it's how they monetized loneliness at a time when there was no social media, no DMs, and no free video chat. Now, between dating apps, messaging platforms, and content moderation standards, the idea of an expensive permanent phone line marketed on basic cable feels both quaint and wildly predatory. 3. Psychic hotlines and the mystic promise. If you had a television in the late 90s, you met a charismatic guide who could read your future from a cramped studio set, complete with neon moon graphics and a toll-free number that was absolutely not free by the minute. These ads promised clarity on love, money, and destiny with an immediacy that perfectly matched the era's late-night impulse shopping. Today, they're odd, not only because the psychic boom fizzled, but because our relationship to instant answers has shifted to search engines and AI. The magical thinking didn't vanish, it migrated. Watching these spots now, the hardest thing to explain to younger viewers isn't the tarot. It's why anyone paid $4 a minute to hear it. 4. Olestra fat-free chips with asterisks the size of billboards. In the 90s, fat was the public enemy. Enter miracle chips that tasted like the real thing because of a new fat substitute. The ads were triumphant. Joyful music, slow-motion crunches, friends at parties guilt-free snacking like they'd cracked a dietary cheat code. The part that makes these commercials feel bizarre today is the fine print and the stories that followed. Words like digestive discomfort became legend. In a world that's moved from fear of fat to concerns about ultra-processing and gut health, the 90s eat all you want. Its technically fat-free vibe feels like a loophole that accidentally admitted it was a loophole. 5. The Snackwell's era of moral dessert. The 90s low-fat craze wasn't a fad, it was an aesthetic. Ads for fat-free cookies and light treats felt like sitcom scenes. Co-workers crowded around a break room box, confessing their cravings while a narrator absolved them, because hey, no fat. The modern weirdness is how confidently these ads equated fat-free with healthy, while training viewers to associate virtue with specific packaging colors and buzzwords. Today we know diet culture didn't vanish, it rebranded. But those commercials, with their giggly guilt and triumphantly empty fat grams, feel like watching an entire culture misunderstand nutrition in real time. 6. Sega's screaming competitiveness. The 90s console wars were a shouting match in ad form. If you owned a Genesis, your commercials were fast cuts, sharp fonts, slam poetry voiceovers, whirlwind camera moves, and a final primal yell that said, "The quiet part loud." This system is cooler than the other one. The result, in retrospect, is hilarious and jarring. Ads that don't just sell a product, they sell attitude as a weapon against your rival's toy. Today, with game trailers looking like prestige cinema and consoles marketed as ecosystems, those confrontational spots feel like punk flyers blown up to 30 seconds. They're still fun, but the ferocity is wild. 7. PlayStation's surreal "what did I just watch" energy. Toward the end of the decade, a very different vibe arrived. The arty, unsettling commercial that looked like a fashion film you escaped from a dream. You didn't learn features, you absorbed a feeling. Unsettling facial expressions, uncanny monologues, stark backgrounds, and the impression that gaming was no longer for kids. What feels odd now is that these ads didn't explain anything and didn't need to. They trusted viewers to read symbolism, decode tone, and feel the brand. In the YouTube era of specs, side-by-sides, and 10-minute breakdowns, the 30-second surreal manifesto is a relic, but an influential one. 8. Calvin Klein, minimalism and the boundaries that moved. 1990s fragrance and fashion ads were often shot like black and white documentaries about beautiful ennui. But some campaigns pushed an aesthetic of youthful, even adolescent languor that later sparked huge public backlash. The commercials were spare, bare walls, close-ups, low voices, selling a mood that feels far more uncomfortable under today's lens of consent, power, and exploitation. You can feel the decades straining to be edgy, to strip away glamour, and in doing so, stumbling into imagery that reads very differently now. We still have provocative fashion ads today, but the conversation around them is faster, louder, and far less forgiving. 9. Toy weapon ads that staged suburban warfare. Before foam darts became meme-friendly, 90s toy commercials often looked like miniature action movies. Kids vaulting over patio furniture in tactical ambushes, slow-mo projectiles, and a soundtrack that sounded like a summer blockbuster. Sometimes the toys look more realistic than anyone would be comfortable with now. What makes these ads feel strange today is how normal the neighborhood battle premise seemed, set in streets and parks with no adult in sight. In an era hyper-aware of school safety, public anxiety, and orange tips on everything, the carefree tone of those spots is a jolt. 10. Collect call hacks that no longer make sense. If you were a kid without cash and needed a pickup, commercials taught you how to game the phone system with a memorable code. The ads were comedy sketches, celebrities barging into scenes yelling strings of numbers, taglines about saving money, and the fantasy that you'd remember a promo while stranded at a payphone. To anyone raised on smartphones, these ads are science fiction. Payphones are museum pieces, long distance is a trivia question, and collect is a word we've retired outside of hobbies. The oddness now is linguistic. Explaining the joke requires a history lesson. If you weave these commercials together, you get the 90s in a nutshell. A health culture that equated fat-free with virtue. A tech culture that solved loneliness with per-minute phone calls. A youth culture marketed to with both winks and yells. A style culture that wanted to be daring and sometimes wandered into the unethical. A media culture happy to let brands be weird, scary, sexy and silly in the same half-hour block. It was a transitional decade. And transitional decades always leave behind advertising fossils that look bizarre when the climate changes. Context that changed everything. Number 1. Laws and oversight. Tobacco marketing tightened, youth protections expanded, alcohol guidelines got clearer, and disclosures evolved. The result isn't that ads got boring, it's that certain tactics, cartoons for cigarettes, glamorizing unhealthy choices, hypersexual late-night enticements, became unacceptable or simply unprofitable. The 90s sit right before that wave crested, so the artifacts are striking. Context that changed everything. Number 2, technology. When the internet became the default venue for connection, information, and entertainment, the old monetization tricks got retired. You didn't need a psychic hotline to get advice when forums and search existed. You didn't need a collect call hack when phones became pocket computers. You didn't need a mailing club to explore music when streaming flattened the catalog. Ads followed our devices. Context that changed everything. Number 3, cultural literacy. Audiences today are fluent in branding. We recognize tropes, satirical takes, and safety disclaimers instantly. Gen Z grew up with ad labels on sponsored posts, with creators breaking down media in real time, and with a constant discourse about representation, consent, and harm. A 90s ad that relied on a wink or a blind spot simply doesn't land the same way anymore, and sometimes it lands like a crash. Before we close, it's worth asking a gentle question. What will people in the 2050s find bizarre about our ads today? Maybe the way we let apps track us in exchange for colourful videos. Maybe the way we wrap almost everything in wellness, even when it's just a beverage with better fonts. Or maybe the way brands try to sound like friends in group chats. Every era thinks it's normal. That's why past ads make for such perfect mirrors. And thanks for hanging out in the time machine with past and present. If this video earned a like, tap it. If you want more deep dives into retro culture, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. See you in the next one.